And good morning and welcome to today's edition of the Captain's Log. Today is the 19th of September 2020. It's 3:15 in the morning and I am at my final stop for tonight. This particular stop doesn't open until 4, so I figure I'd take a few minutes and record today's episode. Quickly, an update. I mentioned before about getting my flight currency back, and I went out with an instructor the other day and started to complete my high performance complex endorsement. I'd already had almost halfway complete, but then I was focusing on some other things. So in order to complete this particular checkout, I need 10 hours in a high performance complex airplane. Your standard trainer airplane is pretty easy to control. It's pretty straightforward. As you move up in complexity, you add a couple of extra things like retractable landing gear, a constant speed propeller, and a much more powerful engine. The Cessna 172s I've been flying around have a 160 horsepower motor, not an overly powerful engine, but it's a very reliable, very steady engine. And now I'm finishing up my 10-hour requirements on a Cessna 182. It's a 4-seat airplane, but it has a 230 horsepower motor. It has a constant speed propeller. It has retractable landing gear, and it has flaps. So all of those things combined create what's known as a high performance complex airplane. I have just about 8 hours so far in that airplane, and I am going to be going out with my instructor, and we're going to be flying what's called the long cross country for the commercial pilot's license. And what that entails is a flight that has to be more than 300 nautical miles, and one of the legs has to be at least 250 nautical miles, and you have to have 3 landings at 3 separate airports. So we'll be taking off at my home airport in central Minnesota, and we're going to fly down. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do Cedar Rapids, Iowa, or Iowa City, Iowa. They're both near each other, and the Cedar Rapids is a smaller airport. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The Cedar Rapids is a larger airport, and Iowa City is a smaller airport. I guess it depends on the weather, and I might check to see what the scheduled flights going into Cedar Rapids are, to see if I can get there, kind of in between big rushes. Right now the airline industry is, not flying a lot, so it might not be too big of a deal going into Cedar Rapids. And then we're going to fly back, and we're going to stop at an airport called Mankato, Minnesota, which is kind of almost due south of my hometown. And then we're going to fly back to my home airport. And that's what I'm going to be doing this coming, not tomorrow. Today is Thursday. Well, actually, today is Saturday. So this coming Friday, so a week from yesterday, is when we're going to do that. And then as soon as I finish that, I'm going to take a couple of weeks off from flying, and I'm going to begin my multi-engine training starting on the 22nd or 23rd of October. And that is flying an airplane with 2 engines. It's a Beechcraft Duchess, which is a 4-seat light twin engine airplane. It has a T-tail, which means that the tail is not along the main body of the airplane. It's up high. If you look at like a DC-9 from the old school, tail's up high, and this is a T-tailed airplane. I've never flown a T-tailed airplane before, and this is also a low-wing airplane. I've never flown a low-wing airplane before. So it's a lot of change coming up for me in the next couple of months. As far as what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the on-road driving portion of the CDL license exam. We're going to go point by point. We're not going to go detail by detail. We're going to kind of give a broad overview of each point, and then we are going to be done with our CDL stuff. And if there are any questions out there, feel free to put it in the comment section, and I'll try to answer them if I can. If I don't know the answer right away, I will get the answer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and quickly cover the on-road driving portion. Now we'll call this the graduation for your CDL license, and there are several things that you're graded on. So quickly we'll go through each one, and then we'll wrap her up. Okay, so turns. When you're making a turn, you're basically going to be graded on being in the right gear for the turn, giving yourself enough clearance if it's a right turn or left turn to allow for your trailer. You're going to have to use your turn signal and use it appropriately. One quick thing I will tell you about the turns: you must be in a gear while you're in a turn. You can't, if you're driving a manual transmission truck, you can't put it in neutral while you're making a turn. It has to be in an actual gear. That's important in the winter, because if you're trying to make a turn and you don't have any forward momentum to your trailer, you can get into a jackknife situation. Okay, so that's just your basic handling. We're in intersections. You're going to be graded on, as you approach an intersection, are you scanning for traffic lights, stop signs, pedestrians, other vehicles. So basically you want to, as you're approaching an intersection, be looking around and make sure that the examiner sees you looking. You can't just glance with your eyes. You need to actually move your head and kind of as that way exaggerate it so that the examiner sees you. Changing lanes is the next portion. So when you're changing lanes, it's pretty self-explanatory. Don't change lanes without checking your mirrors. Remember, we talked about that you have two different mirrors. You have the flat mirror for your long vision, and then you have your spot mirror for the blind spots. When you're entering, when you're changing lanes, you want to use your turn signal, ensure it's clear, and then change lanes smoothly. Smoothly is very important, especially if you're pulling doubles. If you move on from getting your base CDL and get your doubles endorsement and you're pulling doubles or triples, you want to do everything smooth as silk, because it can, when you're jerky, it can make the trailers tip over, and you don't want to do that, obviously. So that's your basic lane change. The examiner will give you an instruction, but they're not going to expect you to do it right then and there. They may say get into your left lane, which is fine. Or they might say when it's safe, get into your left lane. Either way is fine, but just remember, just because they said something doesn't mean you have to do it right then and there. Check, make sure it's clear, turn your turn signal on, do the change, turn your turn signal off, check your mirrors again. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it's just common sense. Stopping and starting. Basically, if you're driving a manual transmission, you don't want to stall the truck. When you are letting off the clutch, do it smoothly. You don't want to give a ton of gas when you're stepping off, because you can cause it to over torque the drive shaft, and if that happens, then that's a very expensive fix. If you're driving an automatic transmission, you don't want to be in neutral. You want to make sure it's in gear. When you're starting off, if you're starting off on a hill, if your truck has a trailer brake valve, you can not valve like the red the red button, but like a hand valve, you can pull it down a little bit just to give your some braking power to or apply your trailer brakes if you're on a hill. That way, as you let off the clutch, you won't roll back, and as you feel the vehicle transmission engage, you can just let off that hand valve and you can just go up the hill. Also, when you're starting or stopping, when you come to a stop, do it smoothly. Don't slam on the brakes. Remember, we talked about before how you can get into a jackknife situation or skid right into the back of somebody. So start off smooth, slow down smooth, stop smooth. One thing I will tell you, that when you are in traffic, like in city traffic, and you're at a stoplight or a stop sign, stop far enough back in the truck that you can see the vehicle in front of you's rear tires. Because if for whatever reason that vehicle breaks down and is right in front of you and you're right on their tail, you can't get around them without backing up, and you don't want to be backing up on a city street in city traffic. So, give yourself some distance between the vehicle in front of you and then you when you're stopped. That way, if something were to happen to that vehicle in front, you'll be able to go around them. Also, when you're in an intersection, like if you're going to make a left turn, keep your wheels, your front steer wheels, straight ahead, because if you get rear-ended, you're going to just go forward. If you have the wheels turn as you're waiting to start your turn and you get rear-ended, you could be pushed right into the path of oncoming traffic. So just a couple of hints. Curves are pretty self-explanatory. You're a high-profile vehicle, high center of gravity. If you're going too fast through a curve, you can roll the vehicle over. We talked about that before in another episode. So slow down into the curve and then accelerate through the curve. Remember that? It'll help you greatly, especially when you're out driving. You want to make sure you're in control when you're driving through those curves. Especially out here in the country where I'm driving, these roads aren't exactly interstate. They're little narrow country roads, and you'd be surprised how quickly a turn can get out of control if you're going a little too fast. Railroad crossings. If you're doing your CDL in a bus or in a vehicle that has hazardous materials on it, you have to stop before you cross the railroad tracks, turn your four-ways on, look both ways down the train tracks before proceeding through or across the train tracks, and then turn your four-ways off. If you shift gears while crossing, that's a fail. You cannot cross tracks without being in a gear. Don't shift gears while you're crossing railroad tracks. Also, ask the examiner if you're simulating having a hazmat load. So also be aware that if you don't have a hazmat load, you don't have to stop for the train tracks. But if you do, it's legally required that you stop excuse me, for that railroad crossing. Let's see. What's next? Bridges and overpasses. I talked about on the previous episode about the examiner asking you to relay bridge height. They might say you just went underneath the bridge, and they might ask you what was the posted height of that bridge. Now, if it's not posted, obviously you can say I didn't see a sign, or there was no sign. But if there was a sign and they say it's 1310 and your vehicle's 13.6, obviously you're going to clear it. But if the bridge sign is too low for your vehicle, always know the height of your vehicle. Most standard trailers are 13 feet 6 inches. So remember that. And a lot of states repave the road without taking up the under pavement, and they don't change the height of the sign. So that could be an issue, especially out in the Northeast, like out in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, that area. If you're driving a a school bus, to take your CDL, obviously you'll have to demonstrate stopping, turning on your red lights, opening the doors for the students, the children to get out, and then. But most people that are taking this aren't taking their CDL license in a school bus, unless that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be a school bus driver. So they're going to be obviously taking it. The only endorsement that requires a separate road test from your main road test is the bus passenger endorsement. So if you're driving a semi truck and you take your CDL license, you have a Class A, but you get a job driving a school bus, you'll have to go and to your motor vehicle department and do a road test in a bus and do the written test for the passenger endorsement. For manual transmissions, next one is shifting gears. So, shift gears appropriately at the appropriate time. I don't know if your examiner requires it, but if they do, you have to double clutch. That's basically, you're in gear, you press the clutch in, you take it out of gear, you release the clutch, you press the clutch back in, and then put it into your next gear. So if you're going up a gear, let's say you're in 5th gear, you're going to 6th, you want to press the clutch in, take it into neutral, release the clutch, let your RPMs drop about 500 RPMs or so, press your clutch back in and put it in your next gear. The opposite is true when you're you're downshifting. You press your clutch in, you put it in neutral, then you have to raise your RPMs up about 500 RPMs, push the clutch down again, and then put it in the next lower gear. Once you get your license, you're driving on your own, you'll learn how to drive the truck without using the clutch at all. The only time you really need to use the clutch is when you're stopped or you're downshifting. Not downshifting, but you're starting off. You're stopped and you're starting off. You obviously have to use the clutch, and then when you're stopped, or when you're moving and you're going to stop, you have your clutch pressed in. So that's really the only time, and when you're in reverse, you really need to use the clutch. And it just takes practice. You'll learn how to do it, just like with anything else. Brakes, don't slam on the brakes. Try to be smooth and steady. Use your the next one is lane usage. Center your vehicle in your lane. Don't be too far to the right, too far to the left. It's okay to cheat a little bit when you're like in narrow country roads with oncoming traffic, like on the oncoming semi. Cheat a little bit over to the right, and they can cheat a little over to the right. That way, you give that little margin of space between you and the other vehicle. Steering, we talked about being smooth. Just unless it's an emergency where you gotta steer hard, just steer smooth. Always check. The next one is checking your mirrors. Check your mirrors every 5 to 8 seconds, like we talked about on the defensive driving portion of the episode, where we talked about the Smith system. Check your mirrors, all of them. This truck, I have 2 flat, 2 spot, and I have 1 hood mirror. Some trucks have 2 hood mirrors, but mine only has 1. So check all of your mirrors, especially if you're going to be changing lanes. And always check your mirrors when you're going through an intersection. And then the last thing on here is turn signals. Use your turn signals. Use them properly. Turn them on, turn them off. Whatever the case may be. And just, use common sense. Don't speed. Make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing. Shift smooth, steer smooth, and you'll be fine. So that's the on-road portion of the driving test. That's your graduation. Good luck. I hope you you have learned something from these few episodes where we talked about all these different things. If you have questions, put it in the comment section and I'll try to answer them. On that note, I'm going to end this for today. So we'll see you in the next one. My next video is probably going to be documenting my long cross country. It's not really going to be a verbal. I'll have some, maybe a story or two, and it'll be just some in-flight video, and something that I hope people enjoy. I've never recorded video in flight before, so that'll be interesting for me. Watch how it's one thing to fly the plane and think you're doing right, but it's another thing to look it through a separate set of eyes. So we'll see how that goes, and then I'll start to document my journey through my multi-engine rating, and then once I'm done with that, it'll be the commercial and instrument ratings. And I hope everything goes well for me with my training. There's a lot of stuff I have to study and learn, and hopefully it won't be too terrible. I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm a little nervous about the multi-engine because it's a lot more intense when you're flying with two engines. You gotta be always on your guard, because one of those engine fails, it can be an interesting situation. So on that note, we'll close it down. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.